My name is Grace. I'm 35 years old. I've been married to Patrick for about 2 years now, and although he thinks I'm an ordinary woman, there are secrets behind the mask of ordinariness. Patrick works for a company that requires a lot of effort from him, and I, in turn, live off the income from the real estate I own. But this part of my life remains in the shadows. I told him that I work as a freelance online support administrator, and this creates the illusion of my independence, which, in fact, I need to maintain control over my life. I have never been sociable. Communicating with my family has always been a challenge for me. After graduating from high school, I almost stopped keeping in touch with my family, and after I faced problems at previous jobs, it became obvious that I could not afford to lose stability. My career took an unexpected turn when I started investing in mutual funds, and this step led me to significant profits. Investing has become a way for me not only to earn money, but also to gain confidence. Patrick and I often went to a fast food restaurant, and his casual conversations about food, even when I was not in the mood, turned into a source of comfort for me. He didn't know that there was a whole world behind my silent gazes. I avoided his conversations because I couldn't afford to open up, but his insistence only strengthened my desire to remain in the shadows. Every meeting reminded me of how introverted I am, even being around a person who gives me a sense of security. After more than 2 years of the usual routine, when I was just listening to Patrick, he suddenly asked me out on a date. "I'll treat you to something other than a hamburger," he said with genuine enthusiasm. This invitation surprised me, and despite my doubts, I finally agreed. Having lunch alone with a man for the first time in a long time was a real revelation for me. I expected him to probably back off after that, but to my surprise, we both felt an excitement we hadn't felt in a long time. Every lunch we had turned into a monotonous conversation, where Patrick shared his worries about work, and I just listened. His words about stress and difficulties reminded me of how important it is to be with someone who trusts you with their feelings. And so, after several meetings, he, without hiding his seriousness, said, "Will you marry me?" I was shocked, but I happily agreed, not thinking about what it meant for my secret life. When we got married, I decided that Patrick would move into my apartment, which, although originally bought as an investment, turned out to be a comfortable place. It was in an ideal area surrounded by shops and cafes, but if I had known that I would live with it, I might have chosen a more spacious apartment. I told Patrick about my freelance work, but I kept silent about my other assets and real estate, fearing that this might change his attitude towards me. The wedding ceremony was modest, and I did not share my joy with my family, preferring to keep this stage of my life a secret. Patrick, on the other hand, was on good terms with his family, and our little celebration took place at my brother-in-law's house. Although I didn't like gatherings, I still found myself among Patrick's family, communicating with his sister and brothers. His sister used to be married, but after the divorce she returned to her parents with children, and his brother still remained single. Surprisingly, it was she who began to take an interest in my past and career, asking questions about my apartment. When she asked who bought it, I had to get out of it. "These are gifts from my parents," I replied vaguely, so as not to arouse suspicion. But despite my tricks, I noticed a spark of curiosity in the eyes of my mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, which made me wary. I wonder if my family really has a fortune, and if so, could they expand this house for us? The words spoken by Patrick's sister resonated in my mind, like echoes that wouldn't leave me alone. I remembered the small house they all lived in. It was a real dystopia, where 5 people existed in cramped conditions for 3 generations. I wasn't going to finance the renovation of their house, even if my family was rich. Nevertheless, from the moment my mother-in-law and daughter-in-law began to consider me part of a rich family, they began to ask for financial support without hesitation. Of course, I didn't want to disappoint them, and therefore, reluctantly, I began to give small amounts through Patrick. Every time he returned with a request, I felt embarrassed, because his expression betrayed that he was not quite comfortable handing over the money. I was worried about how this would affect our family budget, because his work was not going well, and his salary was gradually decreasing. At that moment, when construction of a new high-rise building began next to our apartment, I joked that when the building was ready, our housing would be in the shade, and it was worth thinking about moving. Patrick didn't take it seriously, but actually, I've already talked to the real estate agent about our housing prospects. He recommended not only to consider the current apartment, but also to invest in a more attractive property. The agent's offer intrigued me: a single-family house with 5 bedrooms, barrier-free, ideal for large families or the elderly. This thought brought me back to the conversations I had heard at my brother-in-law's house. But although the house looked tempting, its price was high, and the sale of the parents' house clearly would not bring sufficient funds. I couldn't imagine how they would live in such high-class housing with limited financial resources. I decided it was better to buy this house for rent than to leave it empty. Unfortunately, I left the documents about the new house in the living room, and Patrick found them. Unexpectedly, he took them to his parents, which led to a misunderstanding. My mother-in-law and daughter-in-law thought the house was perfect for them. While I was away, the real estate agent came to Patrick and began to explain to him all the advantages of a new home. After hearing his enthusiastic words, my husband misunderstood that we were going to move. Although the building next door could indeed obscure some of the sunlight, I had no intention of moving into a new house, especially since I was secretly planning it as an investment. But his behavior has changed, and he has become more intrusive than ever. Our marriage had always been based on the principle of non-interference, which I liked, but now he began to actively participate in household chores, willingly taking up cooking and cleaning. It puzzled me. Everything was changing so suddenly, and I began to wonder what could be the reason for such changes. I started to feel that something was wrong. His sudden change in behavior, which he himself explained as a way to compensate for all those times when I silently weakened his grin, seemed suspicious to me. However, this was only the beginning. After a while, my husband, seemingly relieved of the burden, announced that he had quit his job. "Sales don't suit me," he said. "I'll look for something else." At first I was struck by his determination, but soon doubts crept into my head. He looked tired and overworked after long hours at work, and apparently he really needed a break. I tried not to worry, believing that he would find a new place, but I did not notice any signs that he was actively looking for work. Instead, he spent his time idly, which made me uneasy. When I asked him why he didn't start looking for a job, he suddenly became furious. "I'm looking for a job online." "I'm still recovering from mental exhaustion," he barked, and his anger enveloped our house like an ominous cloud. I decided it might be worth giving him time to recover. But it was soon followed by another amazing suggestion. "I'm thinking of not getting a job, but making a living investing, Grace. Could you spare some money to help me get started?" I was confused, not believing my ears. He seemed to be joking, but his confidence, with which he showed me the screen of his smartphone, said something else. He started showing me comments about people who had succeeded in Forex trading, and I couldn't help but be displeased. "These people are just lucky. If everyone could make money so easily, no one would work hard," I replied, trying to bring him back to reality. However, he was unwavering, insisting on his confidence in the coming success. "I will succeed, I promise. Just lend me some money," he coaxed me, and with every word he said, my anxiety grew. I couldn't justify the decision to lend him money, especially considering his inexperience in trading in the foreign exchange market and the low probability of success. Remembering how my mother and daughter-in-law had already borrowed money from us, I doubted that it would bring at least some return. I understood that even if he started trading his weekend money now, he didn't have a clear plan. When he boasted about the first profit, I felt a little relieved, but soon, after a week, he became silent about the results. My interest turned to anxiety. I couldn't get rid of the thought that he might have spent all his money. When I decided to ask him about it, he exploded again. "Why should I tell you about something if you don't deposit money?" he shouted and rushed back to his room. The man I married has changed. There was tension in our house, and I began to feel that it would be difficult to continue living together. My mother-in-law and daughter-in-law often borrowed money through him, and if I refused, they would come to us and make scenes. One day, when I refused them a loan, they made such a scandal that I finally agreed to lend a small amount. But when I asked to repay the debt, my mother-in-law angrily replied, "You shouldn't worry about such a small thing. What a stingy daughter-in-law you are. Don't worry, Patrick will pay for it." Seeing my unemployed husband burdened with financial obligations by his family, it raised a wave of anger in me. All this became unbearable, and it seemed that I was standing on the edge of an abyss from which there was no return. I felt it was time to take serious action while my husband was at his parents' house. I went to check out a newly purchased 5-bedroom house with a real estate agent. Outside, we were discussing the details when my family suddenly appeared, my husband and his relatives, each with travel bags. I was sure they were going on a family trip, but I couldn't figure out why they were here. The real estate agent, noticing them, asked, "Are you bringing that much luggage to watch?" I was also interested. "Are you going on a trip somewhere?" But when I heard my husband laugh, I realized that he replied, "What are you talking about?" "We came to move in with our mother-in-law." I felt a wave of confusion sweep over me. He continued, "This 5-bedroom house is ours now." I was shocked by the audacity hidden behind his smile. The real estate agent, noticing my reaction, hastened to explain that he did not know about the plans of the whole family. "I told your husband that we were coming to see this house today," he said, but I just blinked in disbelief. The husband chuckled, "Grace, she didn't tell me anything." A wave of discontent hit me when my mother-in-law, smiling sweetly, said that, "We can say goodbye to this old house." My husband's family seemed to be trying to enter a new home, and I couldn't stand by. I intervened, saying that I bought this house myself, but the tenants already live here. At that moment, the residents who had just moved in came out to us and shook hands with the agent, confirming their right to housing. Soon, shock and rage appeared on the faces of her in-laws. The mother-in-law screamed with a terrifying expression, "Why do other people live here? We should all live in this house." The daughter-in-law threw her luggage on the ground, shouting that she had heard about the 5-bedroom house and believed that they were going to live there together. My father-in-law, not hiding his anger, raised his voice, "We have already sold our old house." Their anger and panic confused me, and I, confused, asked my husband, "What's going on? Are you lying to everyone?" The husband, realizing the situation, stood with a pale face and spoke in a trembling voice, "I thought we were moving into this house. It was bought to be rented to someone else." The real estate agent, noticing the intensity of emotions, tried to explain, "I told your husband about the property. There may have been an error." I looked at Patrick with displeasure, pointing out his misunderstanding. When the relatives found out the truth, they began to accuse each other, and the mother-in-law screamed in rage, "Why didn't you check everything properly? It's always the same." The daughter-in-law added that all the blame lies with Patrick. The father-in-law, in a panic, asked, "Where do we live now?" As the hum of emotions grew, I gathered my thoughts and turned to the agent, "Please find them a house, and for me, a 1-room apartment to live alone." My husband, apparently, could not contain his anger. "What do you mean by the word live alone? What about me?" I answered calmly, "You should live with your family. Please return the money you borrowed for your mom and sister." At that moment, I realized that the gap between us was becoming more and more noticeable. "I'll send the divorce papers later, so let me know your new address," I said, leaving my in-laws clinging to the real estate agent. When I returned to my apartment, I felt relieved. Although the divorce with Patrick was over, his mother and others showed no intention of returning the borrowed money. After much thought, I decided to file a lawsuit through a lawyer to get a payment, because despite the fact that the amounts were small, I always made sure that they signed debt obligations. Patrick's family rented a small house and started a new life, but his father had already retired, and Patrick still could not find a job. Their family was supported solely by the income of Patrick's brother, who struggled to support 6 people. I knew that they were facing serious financial difficulties, as new furniture purchases did not fit into their limited budget. While Patrick was looking for a job, I was enjoying a comfortable life after the breakup. Often returning to the fast food restaurant in the evenings, I could really relax and make new acquaintances. Now I tried not to act solely on emotions, allowing myself time to get to know people better. Suddenly, I received a message from my mother-in-law, who called me from an unknown number. She admitted that she was worried about us, because it had been 3 days since Patrick and his family disappeared. I returned from a memorial service for my family and found my house empty except for my own belongings, which they had secretly taken out. Shock mixed with anger swept over me. The mother-in-law continued, "You earn a living by working part-time, right?" I nodded, and she added ironically, "I wonder why he married you if you're just a part-time job." My mother-in-law's words pierced my soul like a sharp knife, and the whole truth became clear. Patrick lied to his parents about our lives. He hid that I was his only support, while he himself struggled with the economic differences between us and asked me to keep his salary a secret. It seemed like a betrayal. For whom did he consider it necessary to hide the truth? When my mother-in-law suggested that I live with them, I felt irritated. I decided to push her idea away, saying that I was not going to bear the living expenses, because Patrick worked part-time. My mother-in-law laughed, and I heard her loud laughter through the phone. "You will find out very soon who is right." She advised me to talk to Patrick, not realizing how tired I was of these manipulations. When she hung up, I decided to ignore all their attempts to contact me by blocking my husband's number. Now I could enjoy my freedom and focus on my life. I knew that Patrick and his family would face difficulties, and this thought only strengthened my decision to move on.